while and then come back.
All
So
right.
we're live already now. We're live and we are coming at you from Facebook Live, through Facebook Live. And we hope to have some of y'all give some comments and questions if you have any questions for us, to throw some questions at Virginia. But welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm going to go to that, I guess, the Facebook page and kind of say hello right quick and see who's kind of there. And Virginia, we'll be able to see some comments on the top right. There'll be some comments that might come in as in from Facebook. Some people might be saying hello and or have questions, and I'll let you know. And then we have our private chat here if we need to also. But welcome. We have about two people watching, and please send some hearts our way and send some questions our way, and we're happy to be with y'all. Let me turn my phone down, make sure it doesn't. Yeah, my ringer is off. And well, Virginia, it's great to have you here. We're going to say hello to some folks before we dive in. I just want to kind of throw it out there and make sure people know that we are live. So let me tag you so that also folks on your page can see you. But
tag George too if you want to.
Okay, yeah. Let me see if I could do that here. And it's a little bit tricky, but let me go ahead and put it in the comments here is what I'll do. All right. Whoa, see. So let's see. Yeah, I'll go ahead and tag George as well, and we'll get started here in just a moment. So I want to, like I said, welcome you again. We do have the ability to see some folks that we have about 8 folks that are here. So if you want to say a quick hello, and I guess let's start at the beginning and tell us a little bit about yourself. You're a retired librarian, but what have you been up to with the whole coronavirus recently?
Well, the coronavirus has presented a lot of opportunities as far as I'm concerned. We've been able to kind of reset our lives and figure out our values, what's important from now till eternity, or at least in the near future. Things are changing drastically. We've had a friend die with corona up in New York, also lived in San Juan. And so there's all those sad things associated with it. The cases, I watch the numbers in Hidalgo County daily and track them. And so good news right now, was not any new cases in the last 24 hours, I believe. So it's just offered an opportunity for new learning to folks like us who have stayed at home, had our mask ready to go, had our gloves ready to go, and just tried to watch the broadcast by the politicians, both at the local county level, the city level, the state level, and the national level, trying to keep informed.
Right. Yeah, it's a tough business. This is so new to everybody. As much as we've been through certain things, this is still just a shock to the system, personally, socially, and so on. And I'm sorry for your loss. I know that it's difficult during this time to mourn in the ways that we're used to. So I know I feel for you there.
Thank you.
So I guess let's start at the beginning a little bit. Now, you're a retired librarian from UT Rio Grande Valley, which had several iterations when you were still here. When it started, what was it called when you got here?
It was Pan American University. It had just been changed from Pan American College to University, possibly a year before I got here.
Mm-hmm.
And then it went on in 1989, it merged with UT System. And then when it became UT-RGV, it was about time for me to retire because I was, Georgia retired 4 years earlier. there were several buyout proposals. I took number 3. Maybe I should have taken number 1. Who knows? And would have been much better traveled by now. But I just mentally, I wasn't ready for retirement until I just suddenly knew it was time.
Well, I tell you, it's great that that you did go ahead. You took your number 3 there finally. It's great that you've been able to travel, and you and George have that time now together to soak up all that opportunity. I know that, of course, with the COVID, it's difficult to travel, but take us back a little bit, Virginia. Tell the folks a little bit about your upbringing in Alabama.
Oh, yes. I was the child that stood in the doorway at 3 years old and cried because they didn't have money to send me to kindergarten. And I wanted to go to school. But come 5 years old, I got to go my 1 year to kindergarten, and I loved it. And it's been education ever since.
Yeah, it was just a different time. I mean, it wasn't a given that everyone got to go to kinder, Head Start, that kind of thing back then.
That I don't think they had started Head Start even. So generally, people in my community got 2 years of kindergarten. It was private pay. So my folks were able to be very conservative, and they were able to get enough money to pay my tuition to kindergarten that final year.
And tell us a little bit about your family.
Well, I grew up in the household of my grandmother and grandfather, and I couldn't have had better folks to raise me. And it was just a wonderful childhood. Actually, one of the fun things I liked to do was lie in bed while my grandmother and granddaddy had breakfast, because I could eavesdrop and listen to the adult conversations. And they said a lot of nice things about me, which, that's what I was listening out for.
Getting some points. Take us through celebrating, let's say, a birthday that you remember. You did not have a lot of means, I think, if I recall from speaking to you before.
What was the question?
Financial means.
Right. My mother was a single parent, and she lived with us, and then she decided that she would put me in school in Prattville, which was about 100 miles away, perhaps, when I was 6 years old, after I'd finished that year of kindergarten. And I got the measles about April or May, and my grandmother came up to take care of me, and she said, grandfather had developed ulcers from missing me so much. You know how it is when a child is your everything. That's about what those grandparents thought. And so they took me back, and I just stayed there forever until I went off to college.
Nice. And so tell us about a birthday that you remember growing up, or Christmas time. How'd y'all celebrate that?
Well, Christmases were odd because we didn't stay at home. Grandmother believed in going back to visit her relatives. Christmas was a big deal. And so we'd go back to Prattville, where my grandmother and myself had been born. And so we would stay at an aunt's house. And so I knew a lot of things that a child my age should know about Santa and all his dealings and his sleigh and all that stuff. And I knew all the behind the scenes things, which kind of spoiled it a little bit.
Yeah, I reckon.
I'd be up midnight and I'd see things happening, like putting out the cookies for him, and beyond that.
Yep. And I've heard there's a rumor that Santa died because of the coronavirus. I don't know if that's true, but so we might be saving some money come Christmas time.
Well, that's not a bad thing either. Kids can make their own toys.
Yep. And so,
yes.
So you grew up in a time before the internet and that sort of thing. Did y'all hang out on the front porch, or how'd you pass the time in the evenings?
We played dominoes at a neighbor's house. We did not actually have television in my home until I was in the 9th grade, but the neighbors had television, so we'd go sit in the cool of the evening at their house, either on the front porch or in the backyard or at the kitchen table playing dominoes. And it was mostly the ladies who played dominoes. The men tend to watch Beverly Hillbillies and things like that on television.
Yep. And where'd you end up going to the high school was called what?
It's called Opp High School. And so when I started out in kindergarten, the second grade, I came back to Opp for the second grade after having gone to the first in Prattville. And so the elementary was right across the street from the kindergarten. And then there was the junior high right next door to it, and the senior high right next door to it. So except the fact that they built a new school for high school, my final year, and another intermission where they built a school across town for elementary. So I would go back and forth across town as those schools changed. But there was one central campus at that time.
Mm-hmm. And what's the mascot of the high school?
Bobcats. So
All right.
I like to tease my Edinburgh friends who are my age that we're all Bobcats.
That's funny. That's true. And that's for life. So,
Right.
well, it's Teacher Appreciation Week, and thank you and George for all your years in education, first of all. But
Thank you.
yeah, and can you tell us about a particular teacher, principal that really had an influence on your life?
Oh, yes. There were a lot, but I want to talk about my second grade teacher. Her name was Lucille Pierce. She was an old maid, as we call people that didn't get married in those days. But her school children were her everything, and she was very strict. The reason I got in her class, there was a student who had some heart problems, and her mother came to my grandmother and said, Norma will not be able to be in Miss Pierce's class. She's too strict. She needs to be in Miss Ward's class. Would you swap with her? And so we didn't care. Our teacher was a teacher to us. We didn't really know the difference. And so I lucked out getting Miss Pierce because what she did that was so unusual, we didn't have spelling books per se at that age level. So she would write on the board each week, I think it was, a different ending or a stem of a word like A-N-D. And then you would make words up, and she'd call on people in class. What's another word? And we'd say S-T-A-N-D. And that was the spelling words, and we had to learn them. So we learned to rhyme as second graders.
Oh, nice. So you got
she
into
was
poetry.
Phonics too. So phonetically, we learned if we came across a word in our little textbooks for reading, she'd say, work it out if you don't know it. And every kid in the class would sit there and dissect that word till they could make a stab at it, pronounce it.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's great that you had a great experience there with Miss Pierce in second grade. And it's funny. I mean, those memories stay with you. Those lessons stay with you. I definitely remember my first and second grade teacher still. In case some folks just joined us, we're live here on Facebook. My name is Daniel García Ordaz, and I'm a writer, I'm a poet, I'm a teacher. And this is Virginia Haynie Gause, who's a retired librarian. And so did you sort of see yourself as having this trajectory toward going to college when you were a kid?
Yes. My grandparents said, don't worry about it. And I thought, well, why shouldn't I worry? We don't have the money. And so grandfather says, well, here's my plan. He had this backup plan. He said, and spike heels were very popular, high heel shoes, not 9-inch, but anyway, tall. And he says, all you got to do is put the spike in this heel with a certain machine, and we'll just buy you one and set you up in Atlanta or wherever, and you will just have your own little shoe repair shop that only does spiked heels. And then you'll go to school your other time. And so I decided that was not exactly what I wanted to do. So I began to look at alternatives.
Yeah.
So I would go to the public library and I would grab the college catalogs. They had a few paper catalogs on the shelves. And I would read in them and I would say, okay, where's the scholarship page? And so once I decided which school to go to, it had a scholarship page, and it said basically this Lindley Heflin scholarship, they pay your tuition for 4 years if you qualified. And they said basically it's for girls in Shelby County or Jefferson. I forget exactly the name of the county. And so I knew I was way south of that, but it didn't stop me from applying. And I wrote them this heart-wrenching little letter, which I still have, because it was a winner. It got the scholarship.
That's awesome.
So my grandparents would drive me to Birmingham every year to eat at the Birmingham Country Club with these ladies who gave me the scholarship. And they would just marvel, "We can't believe you came." And I said, "Yep, we're not missing this meal."
So what's the name of the university what you went to?
Well, it's now called the University of Montevallo. And at the time I started my freshman year, it was Alabama College, but it changed its name. And it's a marvelous name. We were the Falcons, birds.
Mm-hmm. And
the freshmen were the fledglings.
So that was quite a trip. Pretty far away from your house.
It was about 150 miles away, and I was very comfortable with that. I wanted a school that was not super close. Like, there were other closer alternatives. I could have gone to a junior college nearby. I could have gone to Troy State University, which was 56 miles away. But I wanted enough space so I could do my own thing on weekends with my friends and not be obligated to come home. So there were people that were also in college from my hometown, and they would offer me rides, and I would give them $1 for gasoline, and they'd take me the whole 9 yards.
Wow.
So that's how we worked it out.
When you did need to come home for something,
right?
like
I'd come home about once a month because you just need to see your folks.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and so what did you study there?
I studied English. I started out, I was going to study home economics because I was kind of the protege of the city school home economics teacher. I was with her for 4 years. She just made up a program for me every year. And I made things for her, like models of how to put in a zipper in clothing. If she needed something done with food, we remodeled the space. I helped with paint colors. I don't know just exactly. Was very involved with her. So meanwhile, when I became 15 years old, the director of Cross Trails Regional Library System, Mr. Johnson, George Johnson, he said, "Virginia, let me know when you take typing. I'm going to hire you." And he came to me. That was when I was 12 years old. He came to me when I was 15. I mean, I was in the library every day, so he'd drop by and see me reading in usually the nonfiction room. And he said, "Are you taking typing yet? I need somebody right away, because Sharon, the work study, has to go to college, and she's got to commute from Troy. She can't get here until 3:00, and I need somebody at 2 p.m. to do the job an hour a day, and you two can alternate Saturdays." I said, "I'm taking typing now." He said, "Well, that's just how to work." So he gave her all the typing to do, and I had to do other chores. And that's how it worked out. I got my foot in the door in the library world at age 15.
Wow, that's awesome. Do you have some favorite authors that you remember as a kid?
Yes, I like to read the biographies. They were all orange, this little orange book. They were all probably the same number of pages, very controlled in a lot of ways. I remember the first book I checked out of the library, I think, was B is for Betsy. Grandmother took me by and got me a library card. I was in probably the second grade at that time. And after that, the library had air conditioning, and we didn't have it at our home, and we didn't have it at my grandfather's place of business. He was a shoe repairman. So the library was literally a cool place. So I stopped by on the way to meet my grandparents every day. I just stopped by the library and hang out until it closed, and then go down and we'd go home. So yeah. I would see the goldfish, and I would read all the books I wanted to. And so that's how I got drafted into working there, because the ladies that worked the circulation desk, it was very informal in those days. So they like to go down to the corner drugstore for a cherry Coke or a lemon sour or some whatever they had to drink. And so I'd either have to do the errand for them, or I'd have to sit at the desk while they went a block away to get their mid-afternoon snack.
Yeah. That's a different time. Well, that's cool. Yeah, I liked like biographies as well as a kid. It was later that I got into fiction and poetry, but really one of the first things I remember was a set of sort of the value of patience, the value of perseverance, and each one featured a biography of Jonas Salk or Louis Pasteur or different Marie Curie, different folks. And so
Right.
now, so after university, how'd you end up in Texas eventually?
Well, that was kind of a fun story. There was a professor who taught cataloging class, and his name was Mr. Kimbrough. So one day he came out in the hall and he said, Virginia, how would you like to work at the Veterans Hospital? And that was a summer job, and it paid well. It was federal government wages. And so my jobs had stopped because they had run out of funds. I was working at Vanderbilt University and at Peabody Library School. And so I got the job at the Veterans Hospital. So it was near graduation. It was July, I'd say. He came up to me in the hall and he said, there's this man here from Edinburgh, Texas, and he'd like to interview some people. How would you like to have an interview for a job in Texas? And I thought, Texas, what? And so George, who's now my husband, he came by. We were both classmates. And he said, Texas, wow, I'd jump at a chance for a job there. And I said, well, why, George? And he said, it's near Mexico. So that was his take. I said to George, have you ever been to Mexico? He said, no, but I want to go.
And so you were already in librarian school, library science school.
It was the 5th year of college. I had graduated from Montevallo, and there was no university in my state at the time that could give a fully accredited library science program. The University of Alabama was starting one, but it would have been retrospective, and I didn't want to take the gamble that year I needed to go, that I would go, and then they might get their accreditation and they might not. The reason for the accreditation by the American Library Association was that if you wanted to be mobile and go to work anywhere in the USA, you needed that accreditation. And I thought I needed it. Ironically, I came to Edinburgh and stayed there the rest of my career.
So the gentleman was from, I guess, from Pan American University, is that right?
Yes, his name was Leslie Gower, and his daughter lives in McAllen. Leslie Gower is her name also. And so he interviewed me and another person. And the other person was a guy, the smartest guy in the class. And he wanted to stay at Vanderbilt. It was like, oh, the ideal place. He didn't want to leave the ideal Ivy League school. And so they were still looking for another person. So he pretty much hired me on the spot. He said, you'll be hearing from us. Well, I got back home after graduation. I hadn't heard anything. So I started a new round of, we typed letters in those days. I had a little electric typewriter, but that's how we did all our letters. So when I first started applying for jobs, I had this list of schools that I thought were important, and that's the only ones I applied to. Well, that didn't work out. They didn't think I was all that important. So I got back, and he called me one day and he said, Virginia, I want you here in a week. I said, Mr. Gower, I've got an interview in Birmingham tomorrow for a school librarian job. He said, you want that job? I said, no, I don't, but my grandmother wants me to have it. So I went ahead and did the interview and told them I wasn't really a fit for them, and they could see that because I wanted to be a university librarian. So I came out to Texas. So Mother took me to the bus station in Mobile to launch me into Texas. She says, do you want a Greyhound ticket or do you want a Continental Trailway ticket? And I said, well, gee, I want the Greyhound because they got the nicest buses. Well, I didn't realize that they stopped in San Antonio, Texas at that time. So that's okay. My 3 boxes and my suitcases got in a taxi and went 5 blocks across San Antonio to the Trailway station, and it brought me on down south.
Right. Now,
it was about a 26-hour trip, I think it was.
Altogether. Earlier, you
Yeah.
said that the smartest guy in class was his other guy that wanted to stay in Vanderbilt. So George was not the smartest guy in class. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, George was pretty smart, but it wasn't. Well, he made good grades. Everybody made pretty good grades in library school. The thing about it was George was so into family genealogy, and everybody figured he was from New York, that he would wind up at New York Public Library in the genealogy section. So they overlooked him for that way. Ironically, the person that did not want to come and leave Vanderbilt committed suicide 3 years afterward. And so he had been military. I don't know what Larry's problems were, but gosh, he was a fine person. It was so sad.
Mm-hmm. Some kind of.
But George came and he thrived. He got here about a week after I did. The library director said, do you know anybody else, when he called me to come in a week's notice? And I said, yes, sir. I have a few resumes of friends. So I got out the resume box and I started flipping through them. And it was kind of sly on my part, but I read him some names of people I knew already had jobs.
Oh, okay.
Finally, I got around to George, just like trying to act nonchalant. I didn't tell him we'd been dating for 10 months or anything like that. It took him 2 weeks to figure that out after I got to Texas, and George came a week later.
Yeah. So since you only had a week to prepare, I mean, where did you stay? Where were you living when you got here?
It worked out. The people at Edinburgh were so good to me. The library director's secretary was Jody Feltman, and Jody found me a place right across the street from her house, and it was a school teacher who had just recently bought a 3-bedroom house, and she had a winter visitor couple that rented a room during the winter, and she had this 3rd bedroom, and that became my room, and I only had to pay $100 a month for my rent. And so that was wonderful because I did have some loans to pay back, very low interest. By the time I got out of school, the first 4 years scot-free, didn't owe a cent. We pieced it together, and I worked all the way through, and my mother worked even harder at the sewing factory to pay whatever was needed to make up the difference between my free tuition. Another way I lucked out, my father had been hurt real badly in World War II, and they had this Alabama war chest. So if you could prove you had this connection with the military, they'd send you, the tuition was free. So I took the scholarship, and it paid 1/3 of my expenses. And then Mother and I made up the difference with the other 1/3. So I think I've lost the thread here. What were we talking about? How the 5th year I had to
paying for rent and all.
Oh yeah, the 5th year I had to take I think it was federal loan at 3% interest, so low. And so those payments would not start until 9 months after I got settled. So they were very lenient, thanks to Lyndon Baines Johnson. That was an issue from the Great Society. That was something his government set up, and that's something that I really was proud of. They didn't just give you things, but they found a way that you could go to school.
Mm-hmm. So what year did you end up here at Pan American University?
1973. I came last of August. We had the first faculty meeting. That was the target date. And so to arrive, because everybody would be introduced to the faculty, and it was a big get together. It's still a convocation at UTRGV every year. And so it's real exciting to come in and the next day go meet all of the new colleagues.
Right. That's awesome. So I'm no good at math. How long were you there before you retired?
I was there for 42 years. I think I like 3 months being 42 years, or was it 43? Anyway, it was all total from the time I was 15 till I was 65 was a 50-year period of working in various libraries, but not so many after I got to Edinburgh. I'd worked in several. In my undergraduate years, I had 4 years of work at the University of Montevallo. The cat wants out, and George has been told not coming in here. In the
Oh, it's fine.
So I don't know. Jenny Cat, please go back and see George. So where were we, Daniel?
No, it's fine. Let me. You want to take her out, and I'll.
I'm going to have to open the door for her. Excuse me,
Yeah,
just a second.
I'll bring you right back. So thanks for hanging with us. We're live with Virginia Haynie Gause, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the Valley here coming up, and definitely comment if you have questions, or let us know so I can throw them out at her, and so I'll be interviewing her husband George Gause later on at a different time. I didn't want them, and they didn't want to talk over each other, which they tend to do in person. So, so George suggested that we do that separately, which we'll be doing. But yeah, so let me bring Virginia back here. Hi, Virginia. Everything good?
Hi. Jenny Cat went out quietly. I just hope she doesn't need to come back in.
All right. So, well, I tell you, how much has being a librarian before you left? How much did that change?
It changed about mid-career when librarians started to go digital. It took about 20 years for things to get digitized, like the indexes, Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature, for instance, the New York Times Index. All that gradually went online. And at first, as librarians, we could not really afford those costs. So we might have to keep some things in print, and other subscriptions we might go ahead and get the digital version. And then it became, people were ignoring the print ones after a while. And so I was one of those librarians trained to work both sides of the fence, but the new librarians were just trained digitally. So anyway, the world had changed. And so it started, I would say, around 1995 when it really began to go digital.
Right.
And
yeah,
so there's no turning back once you go digital.
Right. No, that AOL account and everything.
Right.
The whole internet just changed everything.
Yes, it did. I'd say a big game changer was 1985 when we got indexes and other things that were digitized in CD format. So we'd have a computer dedicated to these indices, and it was on CD, but we'd had like one computer for everybody in the reference room. And now the reference room looks more like a coffee shop. David Rice came up to the reference desk one day, our great author David Rice from Austin area, and he said, "Virginia, what's going on here?" And I said, "Nothing, David. Everybody's just drinking coffee. They don't need me anymore." Anyway, so in the older days, say 1975, Juanita Reyes was the head of reference, and she had to make up a policy that if a patron came in and needed us to help them research something for more than 15 minutes, they had to make an appointment with us, because otherwise we'd try to help them. And as a university librarian, the philosophy was you're empowering the patron. You want to train them how to be self-sufficient. You don't just hand them the answer and spoon feed them. So we were always on guard. So it would take a little longer to answer someone's question, but we were helping them so next time they could do it themselves.
Right. No, that makes sense. That's a whole key part of education, certainly in higher education. And so
one of the things that changed, this is just a short funny story, was that we would shush people up in the early days. That doesn't go on anymore. So I like to do that. There'd be kids that would bring in a Coca-Cola, or they would all be talking at a table. And I learned this trick from another librarian at the University of Montevallo. You get down on their level like this and you say, "I know you all want to talk, but please keep it down to a dull roar and smile. And they'd smile back, and that was it. No confrontation after that. Everybody thought it was funny.
Yep. No, that's funny. I tell you. Oh, my friend Beulah Flores is here. I don't know if you got to meet Beulah Flores. She and I were in the Navy Reserves, and she's in the military, still in the Army. But she went to UTPA as well back in the day. So talking here with Virginia Haynie Gause, a retired librarian from UTPA, and and she's congratulating you on your retirement. What year did you retire?
It was 2015.
All right.
Is that 5 years
Wow.
ago?
Wow. Time flies. So when you were still when you were still active as a librarian, you and George, tell us a little bit about some of your official travel, if you will.
Okay. We might go to Texas Library Association. We would go to American Library Association. And so basically that's how we toured the USA, because when it was our nickel, we were headed for Mexico.
I see.
That's just the way it was. We were going to conquer all the states in Mexico, but once we hit Oaxaca, it was so comfortable. We said, forget those other 30, whatever. Now, I think we had done about half of them. And so we really specialized in Oaxaca. This is not from Oaxaca, what I'm wearing today. Most of the clothing, the tops I have, are made in Chiapas, which is below Oaxaca, another place we love to go, even though we've only been there 3 times.
Yep. And so so you've gone to which are some of the biggest book festivals in Mexico?
Okay, like we would go, I think it was from 1998 till 2012, we did not miss a Guadalajara book fair. And so that was the largest book fair in Latin America. So we would be buying books for the university, and they would be from Central America, which Mexico is a part, and South America and Spain. And there would be countries that just came in for a moment, sometimes, like maybe a company from India, company from Korea, because they had something to do with either publishing books, but working with the Spanish language some way. And so it was very exciting. They would sell intellectual rights. You'd have people cutting deals about to be published. You had authors meeting publishers. That would be one level. Then there was a great big entertainment show out front that would be like a major arena, a big stage with whatever the popular artists were at the time. And then there would be, what we like to do is get a little cart and put an empty box on it and go around and fill it with the books. The library would send money with us. They would generally, they'd send cash. And so we'd have to go over to the Casa de Cambio and convert it to pesos, because usually it was better to have your pesos when you got down there. So everybody have all this money hidden out on their person some way. You know, we might carry $5,000. And so when we got to our hotel, we'd put it in the safety deposit box, and we'd get some, take it out every day. We also, some of the book vendors wanted dollars. They didn't even want pesos, because if they were from Central America, say they were from Nicaragua, peso didn't mean a thing to them. So we had to have dollars. So we'd carry a little extra of our personal money to make the swaps. Like we had the official money in pesos, but we had to kind of back it up with our own cash. So it took about a $400 overhead to cover that switching back and forth. So when we got back to town, we would send the books to a friend's restaurant in Reynosa. So we just have them, we'd put them on the bus, we'd pack them ourselves, send them on the bus before we left Guadalajara. And then we would go get them a few days later and relieve the restaurant of the boxes of books they had stored in their kitchens. And so we would send them just general delivery. So, but general delivery, the bus station would deliver them on to the restaurant. I mean, it worked 2 ways. Sometimes we went to the bus station ourselves, but after our friend offered us to use his business address, that was so much easier. So George would take one car and I'd take the other, and we'd make one haul one night. It's almost smuggling. I remember the last time we did it, had this great big Cadillac, and this woman was the customs agent, and she said, "Aren't you scared of doing this?" And I thought she meant scared to drive across Reynosa. I said, "No, I've been doing this for years." It was about the time it was getting a little dangerous. But what I think she was worried about, did I have receipts for all those books and everything covered? So, but
Right.
we had all our business taken care of.
Right. Smuggling, official smuggling for the university.
Yeah, we didn't understand that some of those books didn't have they weren't officially, the copyrights were geared toward one country or the other. They weren't really ready to come to the USA, but we were cloudy on that. We did it out of innocence.
Right. Yeah.
And we worked real hard on certain projects. For instance, we worked really hard with the Cuban publications. We knew Castro couldn't live forever, and we wanted our university to have all these independent thinkers on paper. So we would try to not buy the national governmental supplied things, but the independent writers. That's whose books we wanted to bring over. And those were the ones with the least copyright preparedness to come across.
Either the book or the writer had maybe moved to Mexico or gotten to the fair somehow. And
yeah, the writers had they would do cooperativas. For instance, these Nicaraguan writers, they and some of these writers, these companies, publishers, could only afford to bring what was in their suitcases. They didn't have a warehouse in Guadalajara like some of the big vendors did, and so they couldn't swap around like that. So they'd have 3 copies of some of these books in their suitcase. Well, George and I had this system because we knew the out-of-print dealers were going to soak them up and raise the prices, and we were going to make sure Pan Am got them if we could. So we would go and get in line before those guys, and the book vendors say, "Sorry, that was the last copy," and we just smile at the big OP dealers. They would let us put a photocopy of our business card in the book, like a little flag, and that was like the set aside.
That's so funny. Yeah. So, well, my friend Jason Pointer is here. Works with military veterans, and Rene Saldana is watching too. He's enjoying the interview. So,
well, Rene, when he came to the university, George and I had to give him an autograph party because The Jumping Tree had just been published, and the English faculty, I think Rob Johnson is the one that called on us, and he said, we got this professor coming down to interview, and it'd be nice if the library gave him a little book signing party. And we thought, well, this hasn't been done before, but we can pull one off. We like parties. So we did. And then later on, Jose Skinner was interviewed, and the same deal was cut for him. We gave him an autograph party too.
oh, sounds good. Yeah, that's good to start a trend that way. Well, so now that you are retired, you're globetrotting all over the place. Of course, coronavirus has us staying home, but you've been to China recently, finally. Tell us about that.
Let me back up to library school. George and I were sitting in the humanities class one day, and the teacher says, "And folks, tomorrow we're going to discuss Chicano literature." And we looked at each other and we said, "Yay, China!" We thought that's what it was all about. We had not a clue what Chicano meant until we got down here and it became obvious. So we became big buyers of Chicano literature. Another little story was we had the Pan American University at Brownsville Center. And so we were doing acquisitions for both programs. But if Brownsville requested the book, Pan Am Edinburgh could not duplicate it. So George was actually on the Brownsville campus, and he's very aggressive about book buying. And so he got all these hot titles in the Chicano literature area for Brownsville. Then he got transferred up here, and the book stayed behind. And some of them we were able to get, but one day, maybe 20 years ago, the University of Texas at Austin would offer their duplicates to sister libraries in the system. So Pan Am would get a call, and Georgia and Virginia would take their personal car and go make a haul, and they would say fifth and sixth copy. They just couldn't accommodate it. Someone had given it. Like even Americo Paredes' office, I think it got cleaned out, and we inherited some of his books, so we sure got it right back to the valley.
That's awesome.
And so that's how we were able to get some of the copies at Edinburgh that they were out of print by the time we realized that we were really missing. It was a hole in the literature.
Mm-hmm. And going to all these book fairs, aside from buying officially for the university, you bought, of course, some on your own budget.
Yes, we had this priority thing. As soon as the book fair opened, it opened on Saturday, and we spent extra days at the fair, so we did personal vacation days. The American Library Association would give us each 3 nights. So George got 3 nights in hotel, I got 3 nights in hotel, and we bought the 7th at our own expense, so we could just stay longer and do some touring and whatever. But it also meant we got to the book fair earlier than most people. Some people didn't come till the Sunday night orientation. By then we had boxes of books we'd already purchased. So the first stop was when Artes de Mexico opened their stand. We headed off over there to see what folk art was available, and then we went over to Banamex and saw what folk art had been awarded awards, and some of the artists we knew personally that were being represented. So we'd buy the folk art we wanted and pack that up, and then we would hit the Central American dealers because we knew what was in their suitcases or their book stock. And so we'd get over there and beat out the OP dealers and bring it on home for Pan Am.
Yep. And aside from books, tell us a little bit about what kind of art are y'all, or folk art are y'all interested in collecting?
Okay, there was a book called Grandes Maestros de Mexico a few years ago, and the Spanish edition came out, and it had a list of where all the artists lived. And we literally got that list and went and knocked on their doors and met a few of them. The Oaxaca ones were easy because we knew Oaxaca real well, but there were Nuevo León. There was a guy that made sculptures out of alabaster, and I forget what city he's from in Nuevo León. We found him. We found a lot of them. And so we would photograph them, have talks with them, try to see them another year, and it was just really wonderful. Because since they were Grandes Maestros, some of them were up in age. And so out of that group, probably a lot of them are deceased now.
Mm-hmm. And so recently I know that George has been conducting tea ceremony demonstrations, that sort of thing, for years, but y'all recently went to China.
Right. We got involved with Chinese tea around 2009, I think it was. There was a little course offered in Brownsville by a person from China and her 2 colleagues, her husband and another of his colleagues. They all loved China. And so they were teaching Chinese tea demonstration, maybe more than a ceremony, at the Brownsville Fine Arts Museum. So we headed off that Saturday and took the course, and then it was offered a second time. We took it again, and so we're still in touch with our teacher Poo Chin and her husband Tevitt, and so it was really great. We were up in Austin in January 2019, and Pooh happened to text us or something, and she said, "Oh, you guys are in Austin. You ought to go over to the Guanyin Tea House." And boy, that's all she had to say. We found our way. And so we were talking with the co-owner, Chris, who's having a birthday today. And I said, Chris, do you ever take people to China with you? He said, I don't. I just go over there and buy the tea. But my partner does. And I pulled out our business cards and I said, please let him know. We'd be interested. So maybe about 10 days later, we made the connection and met Sohan Fan, and he led us to China. He's half Chinese himself. His father was Chinese. And so he knows Mandarin. He's quite good at it. And he was simply visiting tea farms, and for 2 weeks, he was taking other people along with him. Each person had a little deal, probably, different people may have paid him different amounts. But the deal he offered us was, it was definitely a bargain. And because we had tried to find other tour companies that would take us to China to meet tea farm people, but they never wanted to go where we wanted to go. They wanted to show you the Great Wall. Well, that's not exactly, we're not out for the trophies. We're serious business people. We didn't want to go see the warriors. I mean, we said something in the museum would satisfy us at our age. So all these trademark places that the average tourist wanted to go, that was not on our hit list. So the first 2 weeks, after everybody went home, we had convinced Sohan to let us just travel with him. We'd stay out of his way. He was getting his merchandise, teaware or tea for his tea house. And so he says, okay, you're going to need translating services. You'll be picking up your own meals. We had another plan for when we were official visitors with him. And he said, you just go ahead and just hang in behind me. But you pay your own hotel or Airbnb, but I will book it for you. So it's a really nice arrangement. We would all get together and eat at least once a day with the group. He and his other person working with him, Monchot. So they were buying for West China Tea Company, which is the new name of Sohan's new tea house that he'll be opening soon after COVID-19 goes away. And it was really marvelous. The only downside of going with him like that was we'd like to see some bookstores and museums, and that was not on his agenda. He had business to conduct, and we couldn't speak enough of the Chinese to get into on our own. We did go to a few. We found the bookstores. We just couldn't find all the libraries.
Right. Now, one of your favorite cities is San Francisco. Tell us a little bit about that. Where do y'all normally go, and what do you eat?
We stay outside of Chinatown. We stay a half block in a hotel called Hotel des Arts. Each room is painted by a different painter, and they're usually taggers that paint freight trains and so on. So it's graffiti artists, basically. So we have certain of their suites that we like. And so they usually manage to put us in one of those. It's a larger room. You get a living room, a bedroom, a private bath, and a nice closet with TV in both the bedroom and the living room. So it's very affordable and very good location because we know the subway routes. We've conquered a lot of the bus schedules, and we know the people. People say, you have any relatives there? No, we don't have one relative. I haven't been able to convince any niece or nephew that they ought to get a job in San Francisco. So that's okay. So we eat Chinese some. We eat seafood a lot. Various ethnic restaurants like Italian, Thai, Burmese.
Tell us the names of restaurants.
I beg pardon?
Tell us the names of restaurants that you go to.
The best restaurant is tiny. It's called The House. And it's run by two couples, their brother and sister, and then their spouses are also involved. So the ladies in the family are what they call front of house. They do all the waiting, the cashiering, and all the front. The guys are the chefs. And so they have the schedule where if Chef Larry is there, Chef, I can't remember the brother-in-law's name now, but Susan's there, then Angela's not, and so on.
And what do you like to eat?
They serve seafood in a very sculptural way. And what's so wonderful about the seafood they have, it never hits the freezer. It's brought in from Southeast Asia or wherever, straight by plane and never frozen. Wow.
Well, we're going to close up pretty soon. I have one or two more questions. Tell us a little bit about your website. Has been you've had artsrgv.com for quite a while now. Tell us how it started and how is it going?
It started basically the idea in 2004. I was doing for my personal calendar and George's personal calendar on Google, we would make a list of things that we wanted to do, events. There would be like your poetry readings out at Jitter's Coffee House, or different places. And so I was having lunch with Christina Bailly. She worked at the radio station, our public radio station at the time. And she says, you're doing a great job, Virginia. You're trying to be a central calendar for us. And I said, oh, yes, I want to be it for 4 counties. And she says, well, how can you accomplish that? So I designed a little spreadsheet, I guess. That's what I was going to do. And all at once, I started looking for calendar software, and I found some in Plymouth, Massachusetts by a company called Plymouth Rocket. And they make a product called Event Keeper. And Event Keeper was used in several libraries like San Diego Public Library, maybe at one time San Francisco Public. And so that I realized how much I'd have to pay, and I pay it out of my own pocket every year. There's a few $100s. I bought a brand new Dell. It was a gaming machine back in 2006. It's obsolete computer now. And I bought the site license for 10 years of artsrgv.com. I wanted to have it RGV Arts, but someone had already bought that domain name, so I flipped it, and I like it flipped. It puts the emphasis on the arts in the location second.
Yeah,
and so it's been operating until COVID-19. There wasn't too much to say. Everybody was sheltering in place until people started doing online events like yours.
So you moved here in 1973 to the Valley when, I mean, there wasn't a lot of arts going on, events.
Absolutely. An art show would be, people would say, come over to my backyard at my house or my apartment complex. And they literally had clotheslines in those days. And they'd get the clothespins out and they would hang up the pieces on the clothesline. And that was an art show. Now, there was some faculty at the university with Richard Heisland and maybe Nancy Moyer and some other people, and they did art galleries. There was one in Brownsville maybe 50 years ago I wasn't really familiar with, or maybe at South Padre, but it was a slow beginning in the art world. And then around the time Nuevo Santander built their beautiful art gallery on Main Street in McAllen, I credit them as really starting the art movement here as far as the visual arts.
Right. Yeah, and just physically located near the library at that time, and eventually the art walk came about and all that.
Right. The first year the library wasn't involved, there were 6 private owned galleries, and those folks footed the bill. They bought the wine and the cheese and welcomed people, sent out invitations, had Carl Vestbever do beautiful invitation postcards. They're quite collector's items. And that's how they got the word out. It was First Friday, and it would run from September through May when it got too hot to go out at night almost.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and it's lovely to your calendar. I mean, it all of a sudden, I mean, it just filled up where there was nothing to do in the Valley, quote unquote, to where,
right.
How do we even decide?
As George made up this little phrase, when we got here, there was nothing to do in the Valley except eat and drink. And there was a whole lot of partying going on, I'll tell you that. And then he said, then we had events to do, and then all at once we had lots of conflicts. We just had to make choices.
Right, and it's a nice problem to have. I'm glad the Valley's growing, not just in the business world, but also in the arts and culture. And I know that the Mesquite Review was part of that, and you all were.
That was a game changer. The Mesquite Review. I'm not sure if it. Well, Noah Hinojosa, the brain power on that one, and he's a force to be reckoned with. He's really a fantastic guy. I think he went to Harvard. Anyway, he came to the Valley, or back to the Valley. I think maybe he was raised in Weslaco. And he started this literary magazine. It was a tabloid. And so Carmen Tafoya was a friend of mine. And she said, Virginia, you just got to meet this person that's doing this magazine. I was kind of intimidated. I thought, literary magazine? An English major like me? I thought, wow, that's quite an achievement. And he was so down to earth. They came to supper one night. She and he came. George and I had supper for them, I think. I forget where we were living at the time. And just hit it off together. Or maybe it was at Carmen's house that we first got together. So
when she was still down in the valley?
6 years. A big pardon?
When she was still in the valley there in the 90s?
Yes. She lived near Jan Seal. They would get and talk over the fence about their writings.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
yeah, she lived on, I think, Sycamore, maybe 400 Sycamore or something to that effect.
Right. Well, just one or two more questions, Virginia. Let me ask you, what do you add ketchup to tamales or no?
Do a what?
Do you add ketchup to tamales or no?
No, I only put ketchup on French fries and hamburgers.
All right. All right. I like to ask
eggs or anything.
Yeah, I like to guess that question just to have some consistency. And just any last word you want to just say goodbye to the folks and you know, anything on your mind.
Well, I'm sorry it's all over with now. We should have had some questions from those folks.
Yeah, I figured there'd be a few here, but no, it's fine. So you've been doing some gardening lately?
Yes. When I worked that first job in the public library, the boss, George Johnston, if he had a library problem too tough to solve, and he wrote a weekly column for the newspaper every week, so often he'd have writer's block and he'd say, let me just go out there and work with the daylilies. And so I'd go out there. He said, you want to come with me? And so I would go outdoors and we would plant daylilies and divide plants, and he would have zinnias, and he took them downtown and gave them to the board members, and he did a lot of good PR for the library with the plants. And so but it was hot down here. When I moved over here, it was not as hot and much rainfall like we had in Alabama. I really didn't do much for plants, but George means farmer. That name means farmer, and he was always filling every patio of every apartment he ever had. It was filled with plants.
Yeah.
So when we moved here, we had about 300 in pots, but those are small numbers compared to what we have now.
I reckon, especially now that you're retired as well. Well, let's see. Tell us, folks that don't know, how would you describe the Rio Grande Valley?
Well, I was ready to leave Nashville, Tennessee. The way I looked at the situation, Nashville was an Anglo town, and I was ready for biculturalism. And then one day I was at Sahadi's, that beautiful gourmet food store we used to have in McAllen. And it was pre-computer, and this cashier had two columns and had A on one column and M on the other. And I said, what are you doing? And he just kind of flipped me off. And I figured it out. He was counting the people coming in from Mexico and the people from the U.S., seeing where his clientele was coming from. And anyway, so later on, I would make up this thing. I'd say to people, look, there are more than just A's and M's in the valley. There's more than just Anglos and Mexicans. We got the I's, the Indians. We got the K's, the Korean. We got the A's for Argentina, whatever. They're here. It's multicultural, and I love it.
Thank you so much, Virginia. I appreciate you. It was I really enjoyed talking to you, and I'll have to chat with George as well, and
he's looking forward to it.
And yeah, and just give him our best. We have some librarians here saying hello as well. Mary Nevadas is a librarian at South Texas ISD, and Emilia Alvarez Gamboa and some other friends that are here. So I want to thank you all for joining us, and thank you so much, Virginia, for everything you do in the community, you and George, and everything you did at the university, and just that. We think you're treasures of the valley. I mean, y'all are just awesome, and it's a pleasure to call y'all friends as well. So, hope you enjoy the rest of your night. And I know you had some. Tell us about your salsa from Cinco de Mayo yesterday.
Oh, listen, that was just such a joke. You know, I never even found the recipe I wanted. There was this little boy who's gearing up to be a chef. He's in New York, and I suspect he wants to be on one of those Food Network programs. And so he's got these recipes that are so beautiful. They're so simple. And so I thought I had a recipe for him, and he deleted a bunch of them yesterday. I know that mango salsa was there. So I was fiddling around. I'd already bought the groceries, and I couldn't find the exact recipe. So I just kept adding things, and it went on all day long. And so I did my playlist. Nadia from Dallas, who was my partner in our Global Lens Foreign Film Series at the university, she says, get on Spotify. We'll find the good Mexican songs. And I said, well, I've already been looking at Pandora, and I think I'm just pulling my CDs out. And she would echo me. She was on Spotify. I'd flash a CD, and she'd go find it on Spotify. So,
yeah, I know you were playing some Leela Downs yesterday. So, well, there's so much more we can chat about, but I reckon we'll call it a night. Thank you so much, Virginia.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Great to chat with you, and we'll catch you next time. Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for the audience.